Viewer question.
How do you see AI and humans coexisting in the future? And we also got a question about the role of emotions and emotional intelligence in that relationship.
Do you want to take emotions first, or with the other one, I'll take emotions? It's up to you, Megan.
I'll start with emotion.
Okay, go for it.
You know, emotional intelligence is important, and it's one of the things that machine learning and AI are going to be last to accomplish. So as our roles evolve, and there's some great research around this, most jobs are going to change because artificial intelligence will be able to do many of the repetitive and even the highly analytical and tailored analysis that consultants, financial advisors, and knowledge workers in general do. So that's going to leave the piece of human interacting to us, which is great because that's something humans are generally pretty good at. So I recommend definitely investing in your emotional intelligence, and you actually can train on it and improve your EQ. And so it's a great place to differentiate yourself as your role is evolving due to AI over the next decade.
And the other question, I think, is a really good one as well. So we're optimists, right? We wouldn't be here thinking we're not happy about the fact that we're displacing ourselves. So we're optimists. What we've learned in this transition is that we still add a lot of value. As we've talked about, the data is the fuel for machines. What we've also learned is something really powerful, is that there are what's called training data sets. This was a big learning for us a few years back. When we fed the machine with all this massive data, we have 4,000 variables across 45,000 companies. Just think about the size of those pivot tables Megan used to try to generate from me.
Very painful.
It was very painful, right? To break our systems. And it also broke with something called RStudio. It wasn't able to keep up before we moved to something called TensorFlow, which is Google's product, which is what beat AlphaGo. So if you think about this for a second, it's critically important to, when you build training data, that when the machine delivers something, that your people can look at this and say, well, does that make sense? Does it make sense? Do I need to change something? And the interactions between humans and machines, as we've seen on the factory floors, will exist in the professional services and knowledge working environment. But it's going to be a fundamental shift in the way you, all of you who are watching today, think about your careers and your companies. Viewer question.
Can you give an example of an asset-based business as well as a network-based business?
Yeah, absolutely. So an asset-based business is a company that focuses on physical things. It can be products that are manufactured, that are dug out of the ground, that are produced, or even sold in a store. So going through that chain, you know, Exxon extracts from the ground, GE is a manufacturer, although among other business models, you know, and Walmart is a retailer. The network side, the network companies focus on providing a space for interaction between people, or occasionally machines. So companies in that space would be Airbnb, Uber, Facebook, Yelp. Credit card companies and financial exchanges are some of the oldest network orchestrators, but those companies provide a platform, and the network provides the service, product, or idea that is exchanged.
And what's so interesting about that is every company, and we mean every company, has at its core a set of suppliers and a set of customers. But they've never thought of themselves as platform companies. They've thought of themselves as product or service companies. I sell you something, a product or a service, and I deliver it, whether it be as a retailer, distributor, or manufacturer. In today's platform network-centric world, to get the economics of what's called near zero marginal cost, you need to fundamentally change the way you think of your business. Say, how am I going to connect my suppliers to my customers so they can serve themselves? Viewer question.
But before we do that, if you want to learn more about business model and business model transformation, it's in our book, The Network Imperative.
Great, Megan.
Yeah, don't want to forget that one.
Go for it.
Can you talk a little bit about the biases that can potentially creep in when you're training a machine learning algorithm?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a very important question. And so the machine learning is only as good as the data we feed into it, of course. And we've seen this in many spaces in medicine and lots of applications where the human training data has an inherent bias that that then is perpetuated by the machine learning system. So the best thing you can do is try to create unbiased data. So don't feed into your machine learning system any fields or data that you think could be biasing. For example, if you were doing a medical application, you in some instances might exclude race, or you might exclude income. So the same thing with us. What we feed into our system is strictly financial data and company reported data and language, and we try, when creating our training data, to focus on very defensible things such as revenue allocation between product lines. And one thing we hope, of course, is that in the aggregate, some of the natural errors are going to be smoothed out, but it certainly is something to be aware of. And that's one of the reasons why we keep retraining our data over time.
And you have to accept the fact that there is bias in even data. So let's take a simple example that relates to that question, Walter, which is very simply, in the data we're using, which is the best data that's available, though the machine learning team does not like it, it's every piece of data ever reported by every company basically since 1960. Well, here's the problem in that training data. GAAP, or generally accepted accounting principles, provides preference or bias towards assets, and it categorizes us as expenses, employees as expenses. Well, there's a natural bias. I don't think I'm an expense. I don't think Megan's an expense. And I'm not sure that the chair that Walter's sitting on is an asset and he's an expense. But that's the way the information is reported. So you have to basically look at the underlying data and say, does this data make sense? And does it have underlying biases that are unconscious in the way it's reported by companies or countries?
Yeah, that's a great point. Even the omission of data. Companies report much more directly on assets and services than they do on the creation of new tech or on the network they manage and orchestrate. And so we have to be really creative in trying to find the right factors to help key in on those business models.
So as you can see, this is not as easy a task as one might imagine. As you begin to build out your machine learning system, even looking at whatever data you do have, you need to fundamentally think about what data do I need and is it all available to me? One thing we've also found is that we need both our publicly traded data, which is massive in portfolio and size, but you also need corporate data that is proprietary so that companies can begin to put their own data and provide training algorithms to it so that we can basically have machines, just like you and I are giving data to Google or Facebook so it can learn on us. We have to do the same thing. We have to let it learn on companies. Question, Walter.
What can someone who's not in IT or not yet technical learn about AI to get an edge in the job market?
That's a great question. And you know, a lot of this is not happening in IT. IT tends to be a support function rather than an initiator of new ideas and new technology, which is very important. You know, it's a valuable organization in any company, but it's not often the place that where this sort of innovation happens. So it depends on what your use case is. You could be a creator of IT. You could be somebody like our tech guy, Frank, who learns about our studio, coding, start using TensorFlow. There's a wealth of free tools out there. Even just the understanding of what tools are available and what are the highlights of the technologies they use would be great for any business person trying to bring recommendations back to their leadership team on what sorts of technology could quickly be implemented in order to start creating some insight. So just even a small level of familiarity can be useful in the business context and for generating new ideas. And if you want to get into the depth, goodness knows there is strict, really tight competition for AI talent these days.
And part of that is there's no shortages, both at HBR and other places, of education about AI. I mean, there's a lot of articles about AI that you can read about. And the good thing is the major providers of AI tools, as Megan said, are basically making it available for free. They're trying to do the same thing they did for the internet. Google, we're using Google Compute and TensorFlow. There is no shortage from the major players, from Microsoft, Google, things like that, that are making their algorithms available for you to try in your company. And they're smart in that regards. They're trying to get their machines to learn from you and I. And if they can get us to use it, their machines get smarter, which means their applications scale faster, and they get more people to deploy it. So as we said, getting into the game is part of the entire process. Any other questions from the audience? Here's one.
We had a question about sort of what the new McKinsey or the new Bain or BCG, the new consulting model will be. You've touched on that a little bit, but maybe you could lay out sort of maybe further in the future what you see the kind of consulting model of the future looking like.
Sure, yeah. I think we're going to see consultants supported by artificial intelligence tools. Right? So, you know, having worked in consulting, I know one of the things that clients love to have is benchmarks and comparing their company to the organizations around them in their industry and beyond. And a lot of that data is available, but consulting firms have not been very good at collecting it. and putting it together in a valuable way. For example, understanding the business model or many other factors, the operating model of different companies. So I see first it coming in almost as a benchmarking support